Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pokemon. I've got some items that I'd like to collect, so we will be starting with that today. Off to the east of Vermilion City, you can find another one of Professor Oak's aides, and he will give you the item finder if you have at least 30 Pokemon registered in the Pokédex. I don't really get the item finder these days because you can just look up all of the locations of the hidden items, but I guess this is okay for new people. But then again, we've basically found most of the good hidden items already, so whatever. Meanwhile, off to the east of Fuchsia City, you can find the Experience All if you have registered at least 50 Pokemon in the Pokédex. This is a very strange item. Just holding it will cause earned experience to be divided amongst your entire party. I guess it could be helpful if you're trying to level up a low-level Pokemon, but it really just causes more issues than it solves if you ask me, which is why I'm glad you're able to deposit it or even discard it. For some reason it's not a key item, you can just throw it away if you want to. Now, here I'm showing that I have caught the rest of the Safari Zone Pokemon, however I caught them in Yellow version. I think some of the Pokemon here are more common in Yellow version. Tauros at least I know is, because did you know Ash has 30 Tauros that he never uses, and apparently they stopped acknowledging them completely? At any rate, I caught them in Yellow version, they'll be traded over to Red version. I haven't used them in Yellow version because that would break the rules that I imposed on myself for Yellow version. It was just more convenient that way, and I didn't want to have to try and get them again while recording. That said, let's move on with the game, shall we? Now that we have the ability to surf, we can take on everyone's favorite part of any Pokemon adventure, the water routes. Yeah, people tend to meme on water routes because they tend to be very vast, wide open, and completely empty aside from the trainers, and the endless amounts of encounters with the same water Pokemon over and over again. In this game, it's Tentacool, which is actually much closer to actual jellyfish than what you see in most fantasy games. I know the jellyfish in Zelda are frequently electric. Anyway, before playing this part, I actually studied the mechanics of capturing in Gen 1 because it's actually way different from the rest of the series, go figure. In Generation 1, it can actually be more beneficial to use Great Balls on common Pokemon like Tentacool instead of Ultra Balls, even though we now have access to Ultra Balls. Ultra Balls are actually best reserved for very rare Pokemon, and we're going to be seeing one example of that in this video, so stay tuned. We're headed off to a dungeon on the open seas, which is a little bit strange. I don't know what's up with all of these fences. If they weren't there, you could swim around the dungeon instead of having to go through it. But then again, if you didn't want to go through the dungeon, you could just go to Pallet Town and swim south, because our destination is south of Pallet Town. You just have to swim to get there. Also, note the disappearing NPC, that's really strange. So yeah, they give you the option of just swimming south from Pallet Town and bypassing the dungeon completely, which is fine by me, but there are exclusive Pokemon inside, so we do have to go through it. And I do think it's sort of an interesting dungeon anyway, so why not? Welcome to the Seafoam Islands. Islands, plural, even though there's only one of them. Anyways, we need the Strength HM in order to navigate this place because there's going to be a bunch of boulder pushing, so luckily Psyduck, even though he looks like he shouldn't be able to push boulders at all, can learn Strength. So good for us, we don't need another HM user in order to get through here. We can just have two HMs on the same Pokemon. Nice and convenient. So we finally have a dungeon with a bit of a puzzle. What you have to do is push the boulders down the holes until they fall into the water on the bottom floor. This will cause the boulders to stop the current from shoving you back to where you were when you try to surf through it. It's pretty basic. All you have to do is push the boulders through the holes, but I think it is rather effective. What's unfortunate is, this dungeon looks the same as any other cave area in the entire game. Real unfortunate victim of graphical limitations, because this area is home to some Ice-type Pokemon, and in the remakes of this game, they make the dungeon look like it's actually coated in a thick layer of ice, which actually looks pretty good. Unfortunately, even in the remakes, the overworld looks the same as any other location in the game, so that's kind of a missed opportunity too. This area has a lot of water Pokemon for its encounters, and I think you can actually find all of the Pokemon that you normally could find through fishing here, so I don't really know what the point of fishing was if you can find all the Pokemon here anyways. I guess it's nice to get them earlier in the game if you decide to fish, but they also are caught at a decent level in this area as well, so I don't know. One thing's for sure though, I kinda wish the encounter rate for cave areas wasn't so high. because it's getting kind of annoying. And I could use repels to stop the encounters, but then I would stop the encounters, and I'm trying to capture all the Pokemon here, so I gotta get at least a couple of them. Anyways, navigating this place is becoming a bit of an annoyance because you have to push the boulder down the hole, and then you have to navigate to the other boulder, and there's all these encounters getting in the way. Ah, yes. And here we have a starfish with a jewel in the center for some reason, or at least something that resembles a jewel. Honestly, all this capturing is getting a little bit boring because you basically do the same thing on every enemy. It's a good thing that after this video I basically only have like 2 more Pokemon that I need to capture. You know, despite the fact that the capture mechanics in this game are kinda nuts, I actually kind of like them because the idea that one of your Pokeballs, even though it should have been obsoleted, is still a better option in some cases, that's actually kind of appealing. I kind of wish they would vary things up a little bit by altering your approach to capturing, because for some Pokemon, you just want to put them to sleep and then start tossing your Great Balls. For some Pokemon, you want to do that and lower their HP and start tossing Ultra Balls. At least it's a little bit different. But, you know, they're 9 generations in, I doubt they would change it too much. I just don't think that adding Quick Balls and making them the easiest way to capture something is a great solution to this issue of capturing every Pokemon basically being the same for every enemy you encounter. Of course, in Generation 1, the only thing more boring than capturing is going to be leveling all of these guys up. It's almost easier to just capture the already evolved Pokemon if they appear in the wild, which is what I'm going to do with this Slowbro. I need a Slowbro, and I'm just going to capture it as it is right now, and that'll save me the trouble of leveling up Slowpoke from like level 20 or whatever it was when I caught mine. You know, I haven't really mentioned the systems that are in place that make it so that capturing a Pokemon at a high level makes it less powerful than one that you raised yourself, but realistically I don't think it would make that much of a difference, and I would have to go into all of the calculations and stuff in order to explain why that is. Instead, I'd like to point out that Slowbro is one of the weirdest Pokemon in the game because according to the Pokédex, apparently a Slowpoke has to have a Shelder bite its tail in order to evolve into Slowbro, and they kind of merge together. You can see the Shelder biting Slowbro's tail, but isn't that like really strange? I mean, you don't need your own Shelder in order to evolve your own Slowpoke. I can imagine that if this were modern Pokemon, they would have some kind of weird evolution method where you have to have a Shelder in the party while training your Slowpoke, and you have to be near water, and you have to fish or something. I don't know. I should probably not give them any ideas. I think it's also worth mentioning that Slowbro is one of the biggest powerhouses in this generation, used a lot in competitive Pokemon, and really tough to fight against. But here I am talking about Slowbro while capturing the most creatively named Pokemon in the game, Seel the Seal. Yeah. For real though, I kinda like Seel, really cute Pokemon. Anyway, I think that captures all of the wild Pokemon that I can find through random encounters. So, I guess something else I could talk about is that the Seafoam Islands are apparently called the Twin Islands in Japan, which doesn't make a lot of sense. There's only one island that I saw. It's got the 2 cave entrances on both sides of the island, so that's a little bit strange. Kind of like this Dex entry. Seel is apparently the Sea Lion Pokemon? Seals and sea lions are 2 very different things, Game Freak. Then again, this is also the company that thinks turtle shells spontaneously grow cannons as the turtle gets older. Yes, I know, these are fantasy creatures and they don't have to conform to reality in any way. Keep in mind that I have defended some of the modern designs that nobody else seems to like except me. Let me just say for the record, 2 out of the 3 starters in Generation 1 stand on 2 legs when they are fully evolved. So, yeah, sit on that thought for a little while. And here's another random thought. You saw that when you fall down the hole and land in the water, the game automatically has you surfing. Oh, by the way, hidden max elixir, by the way, right here. So, if you were to fall down one of those holes and not possess any surfing Pokemon, like, how would the game handle that? I mean, you can't get here without a surfing Pokemon in the first place, unless you do some kind of weird glitch thing. But I guess if you had no surfing Pokemon, the game would just put you in a surfing state anyways and not explicitly mention the Pokemon that you're surfing on, which might come off as a little bit strange. It might make it look like you are turning into a Pokemon, which would be a little weird. I actually don't remember how the later incarnations of Gen 1 handle this. I think I should play them again and actually do this dungeon in order to figure that out. or look it up online. I'm pretty sure the remakes still let you skip this dungeon. Anyways, there's only one more puzzle we have to do. This one is actually completely optional, and it involves more boulder pushing into holes in order to block another current. This will let you access a small island on the bottom floor that contains a rare and exclusive Pokemon. So we're going to see what that's all about very shortly. Just drop down the hole, get in the water, and then head north and you will find the first of the 3 legendary birds. These are very powerful Pokemon and very difficult to capture. Well, I say they're powerful. They're actually not used that much in competitive play, but Articuno here was very, very difficult to capture. The legendary birds all have very, very high stats, and this one in particular has Ice Beam, a move that is very powerful against the Pokemon that I've got right now. Ice moves are crazy in Generation 1. I think you've already seen Blastoise using Ice Beam quite often, but in this case, Ice Beam is effective against pretty much my entire team, or at least will do a lot of damage. And Ice Beam also carries that chance of freezing, which is basically an instant KO because you cannot get unfrozen except in very, very specific circumstances. When facing Articuno, you are basically hoping for it to use Peck instead of Ice Beam. Peck is a flying type move, it's very weak for how far in the game we are at this point. And it's still super effective against Gloom, but I kind of want it to use Peck because at least it can't one-shot Gloom with Peck. That gives me enough time to use Sleep Powder to put it to sleep, and then I have to get very lucky. Basically, the only way to make a certain Pokemon harder to capture was to either make it much more dangerous, which they have done with Articuno, or make it so that Pokeballs have a lower chance of success against certain Pokemon, which is what they do here. However, due to the capture mechanics of Gen 1, what this means is that no Pokeball, besides the Master Ball because that's an instant capture, no Pokeball is going to work on Articuno unless it is asleep and at very low health. Like, you have to put it to sleep. No other status effect is going to work nearly as well besides Freeze, and you can't freeze an Ice type. So Gloom has to take a hit in order to inflict sleep status on Articuno. Gloom is not fast enough in order to do it before he gets hit, and if Gloom has to take a hit, it has to be from Peck instead of Ice Beam. Ice Beam is a one-shot, Peck is not. And I could have used this strategy against the other legendary bird as well, however that one has Drill Peck instead of a regular Peck, so that would have been even stronger, and one-shots Gloom no matter what. So, suffice to say, this took a couple tries. I was just not prepared for what I was going to be facing, because how could I know what I was going to be facing? I haven't captured Articuno in years. I haven't captured a legendary in years. Like, do you guys remember when legendaries were actually difficult to capture? Of course I say that, but once I actually capture Articuno, the other 2 are going to be rather not difficult. You'll see what I mean later. It could have been just me getting luckier than usual, but I have in fact played ahead and captured most of the other Pokemon, so you'll see what that's all about later. But looking back on this playthrough, there are definitely a lot of Pokemon that I probably should have raised that I never wound up raising because I was too lazy. No, really, if I had actually checked out a few of the Pokemon that I was capturing, I would have found one that would have been a lot better for this. Though I can't really think of any Pokemon that are fast enough to put Articuno to sleep before it gets blasted with Ice Beam off the top of my head. So I don't know. But regardless, that's Articuno captured and we can finally leave this dungeon, as soon as I remember how to get out of here. Nice that I found another hidden nugget completely by accident. I did not remember that was there. But finally, we're here at Cinnabar Island, the location of the 7th gym, and apparently this island has a volcano, but you can't actually see it anywhere on the island. It's not depicted in the game. Anyways, there's a lot to do here. The lab has a guy with a new TM for us. It is TM35 Metronome, which calls a random attack. It can call any attack in the game, so it's a very random move, but it is fun. Maybe I'll use it, I don't know. And also, at the lab, you can finally turn in the 2 fossils that you found back at Mount Moon and possibly at the Pewter City Museum, and they can be turned into real Pokemon. Yes, they have the ability to take fossils and revive them, even though they only have the fossilized bones and none of the flesh or other things that comprise a body. I don't know how they do it, but I guess technology marches on. Yes, that guy at the beginning of the game who said technology is incredible, he wasn't kidding. Anyways, give your fossil to this guy and then exit the lab and then walk right back in and he will have the Pokemon ready for you. Blue received Kabuto, and Red is going to receive Ammonite. These two come from the fossils that you find at Mount Moon, and you can also get an Aerodactyl from the Old Amber that you found at the Pewter City Museum. I don't think you get anything if you take Aerodactyl back to the museum and show it to the guy who gave you the Old Amber, but whatever. Next up we have yet another dungeon. For some reason the Cinnabar Gym is locked, and we have to find the key in the burned down Pokemon Mansion. Several poison Pokemon have made their home here, such as Coughing, whom you have seen plenty enough by this point. It's been on like every Rocket Trainer's team, my goodness. This mansion is one of the more interesting areas in the game due to the lore behind it. You can actually find a couple of journals that explain how the mansion was burned down, or at least they imply how the mansion was burned down. It's actually a pretty good example of the differences between the game's continuity and the continuity of other adaptations of the game, such as the anime, the Pokemon Adventures manga. They all handle this part of the game differently. And I think it's interesting to talk about, so that's what I'm going to do for a little bit while I complete this very easy dungeon. It's not really a difficult dungeon, you just have to fiddle around with switches that are hidden in the statues and then fall down a hole at one specific point and you're good. The basic idea behind the mansion is that it is the birthplace of the legendary Mewtwo, the offspring of Mew. And yes, I do mean offspring. They explicitly say Mew gave birth in one of the journals, which means Mewtwo has a canonical birthday, which is nice. However, in the Switch version of Generation 1, they actually changed the line to not mention giving birth, which I think is just really strange. They didn't do it in Fire Red, and in Fire Red they changed all the gamblers to gamers. So, I think it's less censorship and more just them trying to streamline the original game's lore to make it line up more with the anime, because in the anime, Mewtwo is a genetically engineered clone of the original Mew, and the project was funded by Team Rocket. None of this is mentioned in the original Game Boy versions of Generation 1. Meanwhile, in the Pokemon Adventures manga, the gym leader of Cinnabar Island is confirmed to have been a scientist involved with the project, and so was Mr. Fuji, who we met back in Lavender Town. This would later be hinted at in the remakes on the Game Boy Advance, Fire Red and Leaf Green. I can imagine that they intended all of this to be canon in the original games, but just didn't have enough text space in order to convey all of this information to the player, because they were really running short on space when they finished up production of Gen 1. Also, as an aside, Yellow is going to capture a Grimer here because I remembered that Ash had a Muck in the show, so Yellow is allowed to capture a Grimer here. Don't know if I'm going to use it. Grimer and Muck are not really that good, but there you go. A couple of fire types have also made their way into the mansion in order to make it their habitat, including one of the most bizarre Pokemon ever to find in a mansion, a Pony! Yeah, I actually kind of like Ponyta's sprite in Gen 1 better than its future designs, because in Gen 1, it kind of looks like Ponyta is wearing fire boots, which is really cool. Or hot, or whatever. I think the reason Ponyta are in the mansion is because they came down from the volcano that supposedly exists on Cinnabar Island. But yeah, enough speculating about that kind of thing. Speculation can be a lot of fun, though. One particular funny bit of speculation that I like is the idea that Ditto is a failed clone of Mew, because it's pink, it has the same shiny color as Mew in later generations, and it knows Transform, which Mew can also do. And also in Yellow version you can find Ditto in the mansion, so maybe, just maybe, Ditto is the result of a failed clone and they wound up with a pink transforming blob. Not canon in any way, but fun to think about. Taking that idea a bit further, fans have also claimed that Grimer is the leftovers of this supposed failed Mew cloning experiment, but I don't really like that idea as much. I think Grimer serves its purpose by being the result of human-made pollution formed into a Pokemon, somehow. Anyways, with a key you can actually get into the Cinnabar Gym. I have no idea why you need a key to get in here. It makes you wonder how anyone is supposed to challenge this gym if the badge is required to get into the Pokemon League. I mean, there are trainers here, so one might expect them to question why there don't seem to be any challengers lately, and the rival has to get in here to earn the same badge as you do. So maybe the rival stole the key and then threw it in the mansion in order to hinder your progress? Would he do that? I don't think he would. Would he? It's kind of hard to tell. Anyway, you can see here that the gimmick is quizzes. You have to answer a quiz in order to open each door, and if you fail, then you have to fight a trainer. So if you want to conserve your Pokemon for the gym leader, I guess beat all of the trainers and then go back to the Pokemon Center. Yeah. Not my favorite puzzle in the world, but some of the questions are amusing, so I'm cool with it. Or hot. It is the fire-type gym. Anyways, the questions are really easy, and I actually found out on my yellow playthrough that you have to answer the question. Even if you want to fight the trainer for experience, you have to actually answer the question wrong if you want to fight the trainer for the experience in yellow version. In the other versions, you can just talk to the trainer directly. Also, this area has a bit of lag, probably because they have to set up the doors all over again every time you exit a battle. It's strange. The Pokemon Mansion was also a bit laggy for what I'm guessing is the same reason, because every time you exit a battle, it has to set up the doors again, based on which switches you had pressed. Anyways, this should be the last question, so let's see what it is. TM28 contains Tombstoner. Well, the player would know TM28 is definitely not Tombstoner, because you're required to receive this TM, so you would know what it is. But also, in later generations, they have a move called Rock Tomb, which kind of sounds like Tombstoner, so that's a little bit strange. Almost like they predicted a move that they wanted to make, but didn't end up making it. Alright, so the battle with Blaine. Blaine is one of the easiest gym leaders in the entire game because fire types are really, really bad in Generation 1. I mean, look at this. Think about it, by this point the player has an HM containing the best water move in the game. So just teach that to your entire team and Blaine is going to go down very, very quickly. I mean, that would have happened anyways. Blue has Blastoise and Dugtrio, so of course he's gonna win. And I really couldn't think of anything interesting to do with Green again, so I just ran over them with Mew. To be honest, I felt kind of bad about not being able to make most of the battles all that interesting. I mean, it's just too easy to default to the usual tactic of attack the enemy until they are gone. Like, I'm so high-leveled with most of my guys at this point that they've got a decent normal-type move that they can use to take the enemy down, so I decided to make things interesting for Red by bringing in some new blood. Ladies and gentlemen, our Lord and Savior Ammonite is going to solo the Blaine fight. Yes! Ammonite is a rock and water type Pokemon, so I think this fossil from the past actually double resists fire attacks. Not that Arcanine here has any good fire attacks at all, it just has Ember. And I think the rock type will also allow Ammonite to resist the normal type attacks as well. Actually, in this fight, all of the fire type Pokemon seem to have more normal type attacks than they do fire attacks. So you don't really have to deal with getting burned either. Like, Blaine tells you that you better have Burn Heal, but like, he doesn't even burn you all that often. Of course I say that, but then I get immediately burned, so that's karma, I guess. Also, sometimes this Arcanine will actually use a strong fire move. Fire Blast is a very iconic move because of the shape the flames make. However, it has low accuracy, so even though it's very powerful, using it against Ammonite was probably not a good idea because, first of all, double resistance, and second, it might miss. You can see that it was really coming down to the wire for Lord Helix here. However, the AI in Gen 1 is known for very poor decisions, and this Arcanine unfortunately has Roar, which is a move that does nothing in a trainer battle, so it looks like Lord Helix is going to come out on top once again, just like he always does in Generation 1. Gotta love Ammonite, right? Anyways, moving on to the yellow version of this fight, at first it's not too different from the red and blue versions. You can actually use Haunter to great effect in this fight because the fire types like to use their normal type attacks, and ghosts are immune to normal types, so this is actually really good, especially if you confuse them as well. They'll take a lot of damage. Fire types tend to have really high attack power, which is not good because fire attacks are special types, so that's a little bit strange. Arcanine, however, is going to prove a little bit more difficult because he uses Fire Blast, and that's actually going to hit Haunter and knock him out in one shot. Haunter is not that durable when he goes up against guys with special attacks. So it's time to use the rest of the team. Unfortunately, Pikachu cannot outspeed Arcanine. Arcanine is very, very fast. So I have to rely on recoil damage here. Arcanine has a move called Takedown, which inflicts recoil damage. You've seen me use this move. You know what it's all about. Strangely, I thought you could avoid the recoil damage if you actually KO your opponent, but that's apparently not how it works. However, there's something very strange about this battle that I wanted to point out. In Yellow version, obviously you've seen that Yellow version tries to make the game more like the anime, but In the Blaine battle, Yellow version does not give Blaine the Pokemon that he used in the show. I remember Blaine using Magmar in the show, and Blaine does not have a Magmar in Yellow version. It's really bizarre. Blaine has less Pokemon in Yellow version than he has in Red and Blue, so I'm thinking that maybe they just forgot to add the fourth Pokemon that would have been Magmar. Well, regardless of Magmar's inclusion or not, we can definitely say that the Yellow version of this battle is at least a little bit more difficult than in the Red and Blue versions, which has actually been a constant since the Erica battle. It's interesting. Now, I probably need to go back and check because I'm not sure if this happened, but I have definitely seen Blaine use one of his super potions when he's already at full health. I can't remember if that actually happened in my fight with him, but I just didn't want to go the entire video without mentioning it, because it's really, really funny. Well, with Blaine defeated, that means we have 7 out of the 8 badges, only 1 more to go, and we receive the Fire Blast TM. Probably not going to use it at all. Fire Blast's accuracy is way too low for me to consider using it, and he suggested teaching it to Charmeleon or Ponyta. A really odd Pokemon to suggest teaching it to. So I talked to the trainers on my way out just to see if they had anything interesting to say, and one of them actually mentions that Blaine has encountered one of the legendary birds. Very interesting. I don't think that's ever been mentioned in any other form of Pokemon media, but I digress. One of the other trainers also wishes there was a thief Pokemon, and to that I say, there's this place called Galar. You should probably travel there sometime. So this video was a little short, so I decided to take care of some extra stuff while I was at it. I didn't want to bother raising Poliwags, so I just decided to capture 2 Poliwhirls, one for myself and one to trade to an NPC. There are 2 NPCs that trade Pokemon that, in Red and Blue version, you can only get them through these trades. So first and foremost, way back in Cerulean City, you can trade with this old man. He has a Pokemon called Jinx, and he will trade it for a Poliwhirl. Jinx is an Ice-type Pokemon, and a bit of a controversial one at that. Some people look at its face and see something stereotypical in it, but to be honest, when I look at Jinx, all I see is the face from those old Laser Collection videos. You remember those? Now that's classic 2000s YouTube right there. Regardless, this is one of the few Pokemon that has been retroactively altered in re-releases of this game, and other games featuring Jinx. Interestingly, while they could alter Jinx's colors for Yellow version's Virtual Console re-release, they could not for the original Red and Blue because those are in monochrome anyways. There's no color to alter. It's actually pretty funny if you think about it. Meanwhile, the last remaining Pokemon that you must trade to get in the original Red and Blue versions is just to the west of Fuchsia City, inside of the guardhouse just outside the cycling road. And while Jinx was a very powerful Pokemon to trade for, Lickitung is unfortunately not. Yeah, Lickitung is really not good in competitive battling, and Slowbro is, so it's kind of unfair that you have to trade Slowbro for Lickitung. I don't really know what they were thinking. Some of the Pokemon... I mean, I'm not really sure how much flack you can really give Game Freak for not knowing what a competitive Pokemon looks like, but to be honest, there's not much that makes a Pokemon at this point besides stats and moveset. So really, someone would have had to have looked at Lickitung and thought, good job, people will want to use this, let's make it exclusive to an NPC trade. In fact, I just realized, you're not allowed to change the nickname of a traded Pokemon, so making certain Pokemon exclusive to NPC trades means you can never actually nickname those Pokemon yourself. I'm not really sure how much the other versions do to fix this, but I know Farfetch'd is a wild Pokemon in Yellow version that you cannot trade for any longer, so there's that. And to wrap up this video, here's a short montage of Pokemon that I decided to level up and evolve. Leveling up does unfortunately take a while, especially if you only use wild Pokemon to do it, but unfortunately there's no real way to rematch any of the trainers in the game, and there's a limited number of them. Believe me, some kind of trainer rematch system would have really helped out because, as you know, trainers give more EXP than wild Pokemon do. Trainers might be cannon fodder, but they are good for something. I kinda wish I'd leveled up Abra earlier in the game though. Level 16 is not that far to have to go, even with a Pokemon that can't actually fight without having a TM used on it. And Kadabra instantly gets confusion as soon as it evolves. It's not just Yellow version that does that kind of thing. Anyways, that will conclude part 7 of this weird Pokemon series. Next time, we take on the final gym leader whose identity has remained unknown throughout the entire game, but you already know who it is anyway, so whatever. See you later, everyone!